Oh, they're not right now.
Okay.
But they will. They will be.
All right. But this will be part of the recording. Okay. Good morning. It is OLC Live, and there are three of us hanging out at 8 o'clock Central Time in Nashville, Tennessee for OLC Innovate 2018. We just came off from the first day of the conference yesterday, Wednesday, which was pretty phenomenal. And here we are at OLC Live. This is a brand new thing, an experiment that we're doing this year at the conference for the first time, where instead of just having virtual attendees kind of watch and interact via chat in certain sessions, we also are now having this kind of host / correspondent / conversation with virtual attendees at the conference, where we're able to also walk around the conference and give tours and do some interviews, and also have some interactive conversations between sessions. And so this is day 2. Yesterday we had some fun things happening. We had a chance to interview Kristen Riddick on engagement at Innovate. We also did an innovation lab tour, which was a ton of fun. And part of that was viewing the innovation installation and walking through that and doing some interviews. So are those up on the interwebs now?
I don't know if they're up yet.
Okay, but well, if they're not up, they will be up soon to check out later. We also interviewed Laura Gibbs on ungrading, which has a lot to do with the conversation that Dr. Erik Skogsberg and I are going to have this morning. And we also had some footage rolling of Rick Franklin playing some Piedmont blues in the Innovation Lab, which was fun to witness. And then I didn't get to see it, but yesterday Calvin Thompson interviewed Eric Fredrickson and Peter Shea on the OLC Leadership Network. You were here for that, I think, Paul, yes. So was that a fun conversation?
It was definitely a fun conversation.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm going to have to check that one out. But we've got a lot of stuff happening today, Thursday. I'll just focus on what's coming up this morning, which is this welcome, a conversation with Eric. And then we've got a conversation with Janet Smith, who has been running yoga sessions here at the conference. And then we're going to talk with the infamous Ben Scragg about squad goals. And we're going to talk to Dr. Virginia Shelton on the quality scorecard and her work with that. And then Ken Bauer is going to come and talk about flipping the classroom for a bit. And that's going to be like an interactive conversation. And then 11 o'clock this morning is our experiment within an experiment, which is the unconference in a virtual setting, which I've never even experienced personally. I've heard great things about unconferences. I've never been to one.
Okay.
But here we are. We're going to do an unconference in a virtual setting too. So, I'm excited about it because John Stewart from University of Oklahoma is going to be facilitating that, and he's got a lot of great experience and wisdom related to unconferencing. So that's going to go on for, I think, like an hour or two, maybe from 11 to 1. So that's kind of what we're looking at for this morning. And then we've got a lot of stuff lined up for the afternoon. But Eric, we were just talking before we went live here about our experiences here in Nashville.
Yep.
And I do want to talk about some of those a little bit,
okay,
as they relate even maybe somehow to this topic of ungrading.
Okay.
So Eric is hugely involved in faculty development and educator development at Michigan State University. And one of the many things he's helping vision cast and move forward is a work around a hashtag on Twitter. It's much more than a hashtag on Twitter, but the hashtag is I Teach MSU. hashtag #ITeachMSU. And every week we've been having discussion prompts, like on Mondays, that will go out, and we have engagement with educators across campus. Also, educators who've gone away from campus who teach all around the world, who are welcome to interact and engage with these prompts on a weekly, brief little prompts every Monday morning on a weekly basis around topics related to teaching and learning. And I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I can't remember, but I don't remember what the prompt was even at the moment, but I do remember your response where you chimed in saying that one of the most memorable experiences you had in your education was experiencing a complete undergraduate experience that was ungraded in some capacity.
Sure.
And I found that fascinating and something I wanted to learn more about. So I thought, what better way to learn more about it than to just go live at OLC Live and
Interview
ask,
at 8 a.m.?
Yeah, at 8 a.m. ask you some questions about it. So could you tell us a little bit about what an ungraded undergraduate experience was like for you?
Sure.
What that even is?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to a small interdisciplinary college within a university in Western Washington. So Western Washington University in Bellingham, and one of the colleges there is the Fairhaven College of Interdisciplinary Studies. So a small college within a larger university. One of the core pieces of Fairhaven is that there are no letter grades. It's all narrative evaluations. So at the end of a course, instead of getting your letter grade, you do both a self-evaluation of your specific learning in that course, and then the professor for the course does a narrative evaluation about your specific learning in that course too. And then that builds a portfolio, essentially, of these narrative evaluations across all of your experiences there. So at no point in my time at Fairhaven did I have letter grades on papers or assignments or whatever we were doing. And instead it was all comments focused specifically and feedback focused specifically on where I was in that work and where I was going. And then that was collated into that narrative evaluation at the end of the experience. So essentially when I left undergrad, I had a transcript of some of the more traditionally graded courses from the main campus, but then just a huge folder portfolio of all these narrative evaluations, specifically focused on the details of my learning.
So the portfolio itself served as the bulk of the transcript.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yep.
Which was a big
stack. Yep. I remember when I was applying to grad school, that was a point of conversation across a lot of the universities there that tell us about this tome that was written about you and what that meant and what we're looking at here. We're used to having something real neat and it fits on a piece of paper, one piece of paper, and right. This is it's a big folder. So
yeah, okay. Did you know coming into this experience that it was going to be evaluated in this kind of more holistic way and narrative approach?
Yeah. So yeah, that was one of the specific reasons that I wanted to go there. So knew that from the beginning. Didn't quite know what that would mean for me personally and the overall experience. So that was something that just continued to unfold across the years that I was there. But yeah, that was one of the core pieces and core reasons that I got into and wanted to go to that college.
And had you experienced any sort of ungraded grading? I mean, what do you call this approach to evaluation that it's narrative based versus?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I was going to ask you what you meant by ungraded, and the term
Yeah.
ungraded as it's floating around. I mean, I oftentimes just we called it just, narrative evaluations, no grades. So I don't know if it would be gradeless or, at that time, ungraded wasn't necessarily a term that, so I don't know. Yeah. Gradeless,
Gradeless.
narrative evaluation. Yeah.
Okay. Rage against the grades.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. And so had you experienced anything like that in high school, or have you experienced anything like that outside of your undergraduate experience?
Sure. So I experienced a little bit of it in high school. I had a teacher who real influential in my life, big mentor for me going into English teaching, my high school English teacher, and he had gone to the Evergreen State College in Washington. So we have a couple colleges in Washington that do these narrative evaluations, and so experienced some of that in his class and in how he gave feedback on papers and the weight that he gave to certain assignments, much different than other teachers did. So sort of experienced a little bit of that in a small way, but nothing at the scale I did at Fairhaven. And then I've experimented with different forms of that with my own students, both as I was teaching high school and now in teaching undergrads, some of those approaches too, because it shifts your perspective on the learning experience and your location in that learning experience and the value of that. So
yeah, it's really interesting to me. I mean, Ben Scragg and I had and Angela Gunder had some conversations a little bit about grades and stuff on the Innovation Labcast, and down in the Innovation Lab there is a board where people put up some of the challenges, and there's a board where they're talking about design thinking.
Okay.
And someone had up a challenge on a Post-it note up on the board that said worship of innovation.
Oh, okay.
And it's, innovation is the word of the day and continues to be. And it's interesting to me when we're at a conference trying to engage with people about what is innovation in higher education and what does it look like. It's kind of interesting to me that things as basic as grades, like some of these basic tenets of the work that we do is the foundational to every learner experience. Yeah. Sometimes we don't question.
Right. Yeah.
Or really look at it as an opportunity to step back and ask, wait, what are we doing here? And how could we rethink this evaluative experience to be more meaningful or helpful in the learning experience? Yeah. So having experienced this in your undergrad and having become a English teacher and then become a faculty development sort of leader, well, not sort of, how has that experience informed your work as a teacher and as an educator developer?
I mean, for me, there's a lot of overlap there between those roles that it's made me want to make sure as much as possible that learners and learning really is at the center of what we do, and we're making decisions in connection to that, and are say in undergraduate courses I'm doing as much as I can to support those students in having agency in those experiences, right? So with letter grades, for example, and I've had multiple conversations about this with students because real transparent in why I would take these approaches and what they meant to me, that we've all had experiences where we've gotten an A in a course and learned very little.
Yeah.
And then maybe gotten a C, and it was one of the most impactful experiences we've ever had. And so we talk a lot about the meaning of that and who gives meaning to our learning. What grades do to oftentimes, I think, get in the way of that. And since these undergrads are oftentimes going on to be teachers themselves, so I do teacher education courses, that I'm really challenging them to figure out ways that they can support their students in that way and have those conversations with them. And then that also informs a lot of the educator development work too, because so much of what I do, and I'm hoping to continue to do, is focus on the learner, improving the learning experience, and really shifting agency in those experiences for learners. And that, as you said, the grades, I mean, it's something that I think, as we innovate elsewhere, all over the place, but here's this core piece that is so much a part of everybody's experiences, and ends up being such a sorting mechanism that we just don't question enough, I think. That is fundamental to perspectives that educators and learners then have on the experiences.
So I got two more questions for you.
Yeah.
The first is geared toward the individual educator. The second is geared toward the educator, the educational institution, and their posture toward all this. But okay, for the individual educator who may be entering into a teaching situation where it would be shock and awe for somebody to question grading approach or mechanism, or to introduce something new. How do you advise educators who are interested in rethinking grading using something like narrative evaluation, and doing it in a way that works in the constructs in which they are in?
Totally, which is oftentimes the case, right? I mean, there's very few spaces where you don't have letter grades, so that's more the rule than the exception there. So I'm oftentimes challenging educators I work with to find some even just small spaces within their class where they can shift the approaches and support students in shifting their approaches to the immediate learning experiences and the meaning that they're making of that. So I was sharing this example with you the other day about self-evaluations. So realistic, small step that any educator, I believe, could take in their course that starts to step toward more agency for learners and meaning making in the experience. And this was in high school teaching and undergraduate teaching, will do monthly self-evaluations, reflective self-evaluations that where students essentially construct their engagement points that folks would normally have. So it's a way that I have continued with something that is oftentimes used in courses, but seen as an opportunity to shift the agency to learners there and step collectively into a space where they're essentially providing meaning and value for their own experiences, and that's then a regular routine. And the same thing with other assignments that I might do, that I oftentimes will ask students to provide a short cover letter about the assignment itself, what it meant to them, what areas they would specifically like feedback on, things like that, where they're directing versus it always just relying on me to say if that was meaningful or not. And I've had multiple early career educators I've worked with who have carved out similar small things that yeah, it doesn't all of a sudden mean that all the grades are gone, but I think you can shift the vantage point on those grades and even shift the weight that you give to certain things. There's a lot more leeway, I think, educators have than they realize in terms of the weight that they give to certain assignments and what that ultimately does for the meaning that learners take away from that. I think we sort of take and inherit some of these structures and keep replicating them versus, hey, why does this need so much weight here? Or why couldn't students have another opportunity to do this? But if this is really about learning, then why does this need to be the final word, especially if they're saying, in a self-eval that I wasn't able to get as much out of this and I wish I could have done those things. Well, then why not provide another chance to do that if it's really about learning? So I think there are these small ways that you can shift perspective and approach things a little more flexibly and really open it up to the learners themselves to make meaning out of the experience versus just waiting for you to put a grade or your comments on a rubric.
I think that we really oftentimes underestimate the value of evaluation and self-assessment as an integral part of the learning experience that oftentimes gets lost if it's just a stamp at the outside of the learning experience. So, but if you're inviting the learner into co-constructing narrative evaluation as part of the learning experience, I mean, don't you just have students that say, I'm good, perfect, let's move on, thanks for letting me decide. I think I'm great.
Yeah. That's fine because that's that question comes up a lot. I mean, much less than you think. I guess it would. I think folks are surprised by that. I mean, I guess that's a risk you might take. I have found that oftentimes students are a lot tougher on themselves than I would. So if anything, I've found that students will be much tougher on themselves than even I would be at points than be easier or lighter on themselves. And if anytime those, I'm all good. Yep, that's just turned in. I want full points for this. I see that as an opportunity for a conversation with that student because it's then for me the question is, well, I'm seeing that this is how you're seeing things. Here's what I'm noticing. These aren't lining up. So can you tell me a little bit more about how it's all good here? So it's say on a self-evaluation, I'm asking folks to actually provide a rationale for why they're all good, right? So if a student turns that in without much explanation, then that's a conversation starter, and oftentimes then the response is, I just kind of rushed through that, and let's talk about that piece there. But that's also it's a longer process than just a student does one self-eval and then they've completely shifted their perspective because so many of their other experiences are on the other side of evaluation there. So it really is a longer process of shifting their perspective on themselves and the experience. And I was telling you the other day that it's been I've had multiple instances with students where they would verbalize that they didn't realize or didn't want to change certain things in their learning until they actually wrote that into being on those self-evaluations. Like things that I would say, hey, this is something that I would like you to work on here. It wasn't until they actually put that down themselves and they verbalized that. I didn't know that I wanted to work on this, or I didn't want to work on this until I actually put that down. And just those moments are just continued reason to make those those shifts, you know,
Yeah.
because think about how too often students either then don't make those shifts or are just relying on the instructor or educator to tell them what they need to do, right? And that's just not how I would hope it would work, you know, in traditional learning experiences and out in the world.
Yeah. So okay. So maybe a college or a department or a school or a group of educators are looking at this and thinking, yeah, maybe we could rethink our grading approach.
Yeah.
And maybe we could incorporate some sort of narrative evaluation. What would you say it would look like, or what would you recommend they do as first steps in moving in those directions?
So I think, you know, the self-eval as an example is a really is a realistic first step that doesn't even necessarily mean that you're having to shift the other traditionally graded pieces. That, you know, across courses, could you embed some regular self-evaluation routines or self-reflection routines, self-assessment routines where students are regularly, say, every month stepping back and answering a similar set of questions about where they are in that learning experience, right? Or around certain assessments, could students have an opportunity to really focus the educator on where they'd like feedback and the meaning that they're making out of that experience? And that doesn't even necessitate shifting out of letter grades can still be there, and then maybe you decide we're going to shift the weight that we give to then the educator's side of the assessment and the learner's side of the assessment. So maybe it ends up being half and half, right? They may use the same rubric to reflect on where they are there, and that's half the points, and you know, the instructor constructs the half there, or you're providing opportunities where students can redo, you know, the work that they're doing, so it's a more flexible relationship with those points and grades. But I think, you know, there are real small ways like that can just already be integrated into routines before, you know, needing to make the wholesale shift, although I think there would be a lot of value from doing that.
Yeah. What about, well, I know I said 2 more questions and now I'm on 4.
Okay, no, that's
but
okay.
Where are we at on time? Oh, 8:27. Okay, or 9:27. So, do you know, like, Fairhaven, where
Yes.
you went? Do you know, were they always doing narrative evaluations?
Yeah,
from day
from the
one?
beginning. Yep, that was a core part of that college's approach and philosophies they were founded on.
Okay.
So yeah, so that was from the beginning, and again is a big reason why a lot of students will go there, because it's a much different learning experience.
Well, thank you for having this conversation.
Of course.
This has been very interesting. I'd like to see some more dialogue around this, around, I don't know, innovation as it relates to grading or other basic components of our learning experiences that sometimes maybe we just gloss over and don't think that can or should be rethought.
Agreed. Agreed. Happy to continue it at some point.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and excited to experience some speakeasies with you. Further.
Check a few more off the list.
Yeah, we went to Attaboy last night.
Yeah, fantastic.
And before that, we were at the Patterson House.
Yep. There's one more. I'll have to look on my phone. There's one more on the list.
Yes.
So before we leave,
the joys of Nashville still await us.
Yes.
Further.
Agreed.
And this is great. We've got things coming up later today. We've got some more interviews lined up, and hopefully you have some sessions. I know that yesterday we had a session together.
Yes. Yep.
Hopefully, do you have anything lined up today that you're excited about? Or
So I'm really day to day
Yeah,
at
yeah.
conferences.
In the
I'll take a
moment,
look at I'll take a look at what's on the plate and,
Cool.
and circle some sessions and then go from there.
Well, thanks for talking with us.
Yeah. My pleasure.
All right, and we'll I'll put up the agenda here, get some music going, and then we'll transition into the next interview in a few moments. So, thanks.